I'm Russell, and welcome to the third and final episode of our Working Lives series, recorded as part of the Living Memory Association's Edinburgh 900 funded project, Our Working City. In this programme, we hear from Joe McAvoy and Fred Mackenzie, both members of the Pilmeny Development Project, and both of whom began their working lives in local Leith industries. With challenging working conditions, the threat of redundancy, and organised strike action, Joe and Fred speak candidly about their work histories, and we are privileged to have captured them for posterity. First, Joe recollects about his long career as a dock worker. Here he is now.
Well, I started work as a milk boy in my school days with the Co-op in Henderson Street. Then when I left school, we had a little exam, and I managed to get into Bruce Peebles, which was a feather in my cap really, but it didn't work out. The first year you were to work in the stores, and the men were pretty cruel there. I didn't like it at all.
Can you tell me what Bruce Peebles' firm was? What did it do?
It did the electrical transformers. Big, they went all over the world, seemed like. World famous company.
And was it a big employer locally?
It certainly was, yes.
How long did you remain there before you decided you needed to move on?
I just started my apprenticeship as a welder. I had a little accident, and it was stupid on my part, and I just walked away. I didn't go back to it.
And presumably the working conditions then in a firm like that aren't anything like they are today.
No, that was never a problem there. The workers were quite well looked after compared to my next job, which was the shipyards.
Based down in the Port of Leith?
Henry Rob's, where the ocean terminal is now.
So what age were you when you moved into Henry Rob's?
16-year-old.
Wow, that's very young. Did you take any of the skills, the apprentice skills, the welding skills that you started in Bruce Peebles into Henry Rob's, or was it a different kind of job completely?
A different kind of job completely. They would only take one apprentice welder a year. The union was quite strict in that. So I had to take a job as a ship's caulker. Well, they were called caulker burners. The one side, the burners cut all the steel that was needed for a ship to whatever shape or size was needed. The caulker was, they fitted the portholes, windows, watertight spaces, watertight doors. They did all that kind of work.
It sounds kind of heavy, and it sounds kind of hard going.
It was very physical, very basic. You had no conditions at all. My most shocking thing was the toilet. It was stuck in my mind to this day. It was a long, long building. There was an old gentleman on the door, and he was a retired riveter, and he would take your watch number, and he walked in, and it was just a row of men sitting in little cubicles, shoulder to shoulder, reading their newspapers, whatever, and there was a continual flow of water in a truck below us, and everything that was done was dropped, passed underneath you, and just out of school, and they think, no, that wasn't for me. You were frightened to go to the toilet, really.
It sounds medieval.
It was. Oh, the shipyards, whatever boat you were working in, you were given a wooden box, and that was your changing place in the mornings going to work. You would put on the clothes from the night before, and they would probably still be wet some days, and there were no place to dry them, and that was it. No tea breaks. If you were caught taking tea, instant dismissal. Oh, it was really basic, the shipyards.
But you stuck it out?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of likes of things. The camaraderie with the workmen was good. You know, the workmen. Much different from Bruce Peebles. Things did improve. The unions were fighting all the time for better conditions and that, and they did improve. Like, say, you weren't given any workwear at all, no overalls or boots. You had to supply all these yourself. You were going in civilian clothes to your work, really.
And how did the union reps agitate for better conditions? They did that with your support, presumably, with the workers' support and
there
voice.
Was quite a lot of strikes. You know, nothing long and prolonged, but just nuisance strikes, you know. And it did get better, but it was still, there was no pensions, things like that. It was still a sort of basic job, actually. The men could work there 40, 50 years and walk away with nothing, you know.
So you didn't have a contract of sorts?
Not really, no. You were always dependent on the next boat. You know, the boats was getting built, and you thought, if another one doesn't come along, you were paid off. But usually the eve of the payoff there'd be another order that come up, so you were always hanging on, no job security at all.
It sounds like a really quite a stressful way to live. How did you mentally kind of adjust to that way of working?
It was just part of your life, really. Just accepted. It was always a strain, Yeah, the worry of unemployment. Mm-hmm.
How long did you stay with Henry Robbs then?
Well, I worked there till it was time to go into the army. I went into the Royal Engineers and I was 2.5 years there. 6 months in the UK in Aldershot and 2 years in Osnabrück, Germany. And your ex-employer was legally bound to take you back for 6 months, which was a good thing because there was a real slump in jobs. There was no jobs going at all. So he had to take me back for the 6 months. So I did my 6 months and then I got a job down south in Lowestoft, same kind of work, shipbuilders, in a company called Brute Marine, and it was like night and day. The conditions was 100%, 200% better. The area was all in flower gardens. Everybody had a mate. They had a shop on the site. If you needed a drink in the hot weather, your mate would go and get it. A different job altogether, yeah.
This is down in East Anglia, isn't
it,
Lowestoft?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So night and day, chalk and cheese to working at Robbs.
And I didn't think we would be accepted, but there was a lot of English and Irish men. They had got a big order for Russian trawlers, and they were looking for all the tradesmen they could get. So I was a couple of years down there until I got married, came back home.
Presumably you continued in the same line of work when you moved back to Scotland?
Yes, back to the shipyards.
And was that at Robbs as well?
Yes, I think that they maybe amalgamated with a Dundee firm, Rob Callanan, around about that time, But it was the same kind of work. The conditions were much better, but in comparison to Lowestoft, no.
Now, earlier you talked about these kind of nuisance strikes and this kind of thing. Did you take part in a strike at all? Do you remember your first strike and what they were like?
One I'll always remember, they had a national apprentice strike, and all the apprentices in the whole of the UK, or maybe just Scotland, but it could have been the whole UK, went and strike. And I remember we got a £0.50, which was 2 6p strike pay every week. Which I had to hand over to my mum, but that's what was given to us. It lasted a few weeks, for better conditions and better pay.
So was the outcome of these strikes usually positive?
Well, I don't really know. There would probably be a slight difference, but not really. If you put on overalls, I found in the shipyards in Scotland, there was a gap, there was a bridge there. The employers knew were different, because I eventually got a job as a foreman later on in life, back in the yard. I remember getting told at the interview, it's you or us sort of thing,
So you're on the other side of the fence.
That's right.
And presumably when you got the foreman's job, you had colleagues that were on the side of the fence that you'd just come from.
And you were warned not to mix.
How did that affect camaraderie and friendship? And because it sounds like the yard bosses and what have you, the high hegians, are creating a kind of a them and us kind of thing.
Definitely so.
How did you manage that?
I think when I took that step, there was changes. You just ignored that advice. But I think in the old days there was a gap between you and the foreman,
But if you wanted to get on in life, earn a bit more money, presumably this foreman's job was an attractive
next step up,
an attractive prospect, especially if you got family, right?
That's right.
You mentioned that you moved away from Edinburgh and lived in East Lothian for 25 years. What took you out there?
Well, I was quite late in life doing that. I would be in my 50s, 55, something like that. I was coming to the end of my working times, I had moved from ship repair into oil-related work. I worked with a company called SB Offshore. They were based in Granton. And I worked offshore for a couple of years. And then moved on to the oil construction yard in Metal in Fife. And I worked there till, what age would I be then? 60? 55, 60, something like that.
It sounds like very different kind of work to the shipyard.
It was well paid. The working in the rigs was time out of your life, really. You were 2-3 weeks on and 2 weeks at home. And when you're out there, you were just up in the morning, work, out, some tea and into bed. It was non-stop, you know. The money was the main attraction, the good salary.
If I ask you to look back on your working life, is there a particular job or period that you remember quite fondly? What would it be?
It'd be the oil rig construction. The standards were higher because these vessels were going into the North Sea and they had to withstand all weathers. So everything was inspected 3 or 4 times over, and everything was x-rayed, all the welds, and the work had to be first class, you know.
So lots of checks and balances going on.
All the time, yeah.
And was that a kind of a motivating kind of thing? I'm producing something here that has to be high quality. Did you feel kind of proud of that kind of work?
Certainly so, especially when the time came for the launch of the rigs. Marvellous piece of engineering. They would have this monstrous steel structure had to be slid down similar to a ship getting launched, but much slower. And then it would sit on the quayside till the tide was at a certain level, and then it would be put on to these barges. Marvellous bit of engineering, skill, superb, you know.
And I imagine, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you standing there and watching that piece of machinery go out to its new home in the North Sea.
That's right.
That must have been quite a thing.
It was. The first one I remember was the Brent field, and it's still producing oil. And that was in the 70s that first Brent rig was launched.
It's one of the famous ones.
And it's still producing oil, that field. So.
And you were part of that?
Yes.
That's an interesting thing to look back on, isn't it?
Yeah.
My first job was an apprentice with a firm called Smith and McAvoy. They were in Citadel, where the Citadel Youth Club is now. That was a firm that did repairs for breweries and distilleries and did moulding, castings and bits and pieces. So they were an engineering firm to a certain extent, as well as being a coppersmith's side.
And you started there straight from school, 15, 16?
Yep, 15, 16.
And what was your first role within that firm? What were you doing?
Just assisting the tradesmen and learning the trade and doing whatever parts we could do with it.
So could you describe to me a typical day for you?
If the tradesman was welding, you welded to the back of them and brought the welds back out. Or you can do the soldering and learning how to planish with a hammer properly so you didn't mark the surfaces, which was a big thing. Basically, they had coke fires in the days. Putting something on a coke fire and brazing and welding on a coke fire. As I say, they had a moulding shop. Sometimes you would have to go through and assist the moulders to pour the metal. They had a machine shop next door. Some of your work would have to go into the machine shop and the machine boys would machine it for you. So you had all these variations. And things like they would get rolls in from the paper mill and you would cut the ends off so as they would go in the pot and the scrap copper would get taken away to scrap merchants and various jobs like that. You could be working with a mallet that's about that height and it's 7 pound in weight and for to knock some of the copper down and deal with the copper. You had to be pretty strong. Physically, it's never strength. It's knowing how to hit something or do something. It's like picking up a weight. It's knowing how to pick the weight up rather than physically building and being stuck in a gym all day.
But it sounds also like it's quite precise work as well.
Yeah. No, it has to be precise. We were apprentices. We had to go to Ramsey Tech to learn the technical side in the schooling, and you were an apprentice because you went into a brewery or a distillery and you had to actually work with the journeyman when they were doing the repairs to the pipes or doing the mash tun repairs and various bits and pieces inside of different places. And I had a break for that to a certain extent because I was part of an amateur wrestling school at the same time. I used to go to Ramsey Tech and David Tech, come back out and run from Ramsey Tech right down to Pilmeny Park because that's what, the big house in Pilmeny Park, that was where the wrestling club was, and do our training. Leith had an amateur wrestling club and the Milton had their amateur wrestling club for Edinburgh. So there was 2 clubs inside of Edinburgh area doing what they call Greco-Roman catch-as-catch-can. So it was really good.
And were any of your peers or workmates in your place of work involved in that as well?
Yeah, John Baxter, who actually wrestled for Scotland, he worked in the machine shop. So John and I were neighbours all the time.
What was the hierarchy like?
We only had 2 bosses when we were in Smith & Gowns. So the hierarchy to that was not very much. So I did my apprenticeship there. I finished that when I was 20, and they wanted me to stay on for another year for what they called an approver's year at that time. And I went, I'm not staying here for an approver's year. So I went up to Macmillan's, which was in Shrub Hill. They built stills for distilleries, and they still did the repairs in the distilleries and breweries, but mostly building stills. And of course, you had to learn a different cat or ideas for building a still completely compared to just doing wee repairs. So I did that for just over a year, and I wasn't very good at it, I must admit, because I had never done 4 or 5 years at it. In the days, you had to be able to do a bonus side setup, and it was all bonus money and all timing. I was alright if it was just a brewery, distillery, repair and all the rest. I could do all that side of it. But when it came to actually building a still and setting a still up, I wasn't as good as it.
Different skills, I suppose.
It was a completely different skills. A lot of people didn't realise, when you go around a still, how many people can actually find where the wells are in a still. People believe it's just one big sheet of copper. It's a whole different sheets of copper. They're only 8x4 sheets, and they're all put together and welded. You start off the bottom, or the old stills, it's 5/8 thick, and then they bring it up and put an edge on it, and that's trimmed down to 3/8 thick, and then that's all welded with plates, and then you've got your top goes on top of that, and that gets all welded. These are all skilled crafts that's got to be done, and all these welds, you can't see them. It takes an awful lot. If there was a mark on a weld, believe you me, the Max actually did a still when X-ray was just coming in. We did a still, and it had to be X-rayed to see about porous and all the rest of it. It was getting cut in half or go to Russia. So it was a completely different skill idealism. And as I say, I wasn't as good as the rest of the guys. For Max, I was able to say, right, I'm no good at this, blah, blah, blah. And I spoke to the union basis. Nah, Fred, but we're going to have to fire you and then walk away. I said, oh, well, fair enough. So I came across to Easter Road, where Little's is, and they had a firm called Todd's, and they built big clarifiers for the chemical works, which was heavy gauge. But their bonus was a strange bonus. It was done by weight. Whatever weight you put out, it meant that somebody could get small clarifiers for the houses to do, which was a awful lot of workmanship and no money, because they were lightweight. Us strong boys can't what to do. I would get the heavy ones, and I could produce them faster. So it was a bit of an awkward setup, that one.
What was the bonus based on?
In Todd's, it was a case of when it was finished, the weight, they worked out so much per pound in weight in Todd's. So that's how it was never any good, because as I said, if somebody bought a lightweight thing, he would have to put an awful lot of work in to get a lot less than the guy putting in a heavy tank. So that's where the big difference was. Instead of Max, it was all timed. They worked out that it would take you so much time to bend the pipes or so much time to weld the welds and the stills and things like that. So it was completely different. Then I went for, when Todd's closed down, there was a company in Broughton Market called Lester Smiths, and Lester Smiths did all stainless steel, and they did just stainless steel catering work for stainless steel tops for hospitals, the heavy gauges stuff, or big restaurants and things like that. So I worked for them for a while, and they were moving outside of Edinburgh. Luckily, Rosyth Dockyard were hiring at the time, and you could walk into Rosyth Dockyard and get a job in the water. When we worked in the dockyard, where I finished up working at my working life, we worked on anything. The old-fashioned submarines, we worked on any type of the warships at all. I worked on the nuclear submarines. I worked across at Queensferry when they did the wooden boats, the minesweepers. And
you're still using the skills that you learned as an apprentice.
That's right.
All the way through your career.
All the way through the career, because you were bending different types of pipes. It was a variation of jobs. When you went out to Farslane, of course, you were working on nuclear submarines, and of course the guys at Farslane had the guns and the bullets, You know? And if you were working, say, what we would call an emergency job, you went through to Fars Line and you worked on a nuclear submarine and you did a bit of pipe work on a submarine. But it was during the night sometimes. It wasn't just day shift. So you would come back off the boat and you'd maybe been working with oxyacetylene torches at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and all you would hear was click click, your hands were up. That guy's sitting with a rifle with a bullet in it. If you didn't put your hands up, you're in trouble.
This sounds terrifying.
It was. They guys are on alert all the time. Fars Line, even if you were in Fars Line with a car and you parked the car and you turned your pass the wrong way, that was an offence. You had to go up to a main office and answer to a guy for it.
You're in a high security
area. You know, your passes must be shown properly and everything done properly.
Our thanks to Joe, Fred and everyone at the Pilmeny Development Project for contributing to this programme. The Living Memory Association acknowledges the support of the City of Edinburgh Council's Edinburgh 900 Fund for the Our Working City podcast series. We're always looking for folk to contribute to our Lived Histories podcasts. Why not get in touch with us at comhist@googlemail.com or visit our wee Museum of Memory at Ocean Terminal Shopping Centre in Leith, Edinburgh. Follow us on Facebook at Thelma Scotland. We're also on Instagram, X and TikTok. Until next time, cheerio.